During well operations, water-based fluids such as seawater, brine or water-based mud can become contaminated with oil-based mud or formation hydrocarbons. This contamination can result from a number of different operations, including wellbore cleanups, riser disconnects, rig floor washing and well intervention displacements. Once a water-based fluid is contaminated with too much oil, it is prohibited to discharge the fluid to sea, and the fluid is then categorized as waste. This program is to make you aware of safety concerns regarding the backloading of hazardous oil-contaminated cargo, otherwise known as slops or wet bulk waste, from offshore installations. Although industry guidelines for the carriage of oil-contaminated cargo by marine vessels have been published for a number of years, a persistent number of incidents with the potential to cause fatalities are still occurring. We would therefore like to introduce or reintroduce you to the Guidelines for Offshore Marine Operations, which provides guidance on eliminating or reducing hazards. This program has been developed for all people involved with the storage, handling and transportation of wet bulk waste, including personnel from offshore installations, supply vessels and onshore logistics. There have been a large number of incidents across the industry where hydrogen sulfide gas, known as H2S, and other hazards have been detected in waste fluids that have been transported to shore from an oil and gas installation. These incidents have had variable impact, from minor delay to fatalities, and are still occurring. It's clear that we need to take action.
We should be aware of H2S because this is an extremely dangerous gas that's found in lots of places offshore and in lots of fluids and chemicals that are transported onshore. Therefore, it's very important that policies and procedures are followed at all times to prevent release of this gas. In very low concentrations, it has a very distinctive rotten egg smell, but as the concentration of the gas goes up, it numbs your sense of smell. And it will only take the equivalent of one asthma inhaler puff into something the size of an oil barrel to numb your sense of smell, so you don't realise the gas is there. It can very quickly lead to unconsciousness and death. Therefore, it's very important that you consider the risk of H2S at all times.
So why do things go wrong? In this simulation, the decision for slops disposal is made offshore by the operator drilling representative who manages the drilling program.
Frank, just remember there's some slops we need to get rid of.
Okay. How much?
About 2,000 barrels, I guess. The boat that's alongside, does it have room?
I'll check. What's the rush?
We need the pit space for the completion fluid, and we'll be shut down if we don't backload it ASAP.
There are a number of things that can increase the risk of generating H2S from the transportation of slops from rigs to shore. One thing is poor planning, which can cause unnecessary urgency and poor decision-making.
Well, it's got space.
We're desperate to backload the slops to the boat now. Can you get this sorted for me? Soon as.
Oh, okay.
The mud engineer has been caught unaware that the slops are to be backloaded to the boat that's currently alongside the rig. Under pressure to avoid non-productive time, he takes a previous backload form and amends dates and volumes. No testing of the slops has been carried out, and no treatment has been made to the slops.
Oh, is that another one of those backload forms?
Yeah.
How much slops we got this time?
2,000 barrels?
Okay, I think we've got the space. Listen, stick them on top of the empty oar-based mud tanks we've just pumped up to the rig. Oh, and remember to file the form because onshore sometimes ask about them.
Will do.
Okay, cheers, Jim.
The vessel master hasn't checked the backload analysis form. He doesn't know if the waste is safe for transit and whether the required treatments have been undertaken. The master has also decided to put the slops into tanks containing oil-based residue without considering the risks. This residue is an additional food source for sulfate-reducing bacteria. Even if the required slops treatments have been carried out on the installation, by putting the waste fluid into tanks containing residual volume, the final chemistry of the fluid has been affected and may allow the growth of bacteria that generates H2S.
Jim, tell the rig we're ready when they are.
The slops have not been treated with biocide and therefore will contain bacteria. Once this bacteria finds a food source, in this case oily residue, the risk of H2S generation increases significantly. Once generated, it should be noted that the gas can enter the ship's accommodation through intake fans. As stated in the industry guidelines, the slops should be removed from the supply vessel as a priority at the first port of call.
Vessel's in port. Offloading as we speak.
We'll need to get back here as soon as possible, otherwise we'll have to shut down.
What about the slops?
It's only dirty water. We need to get the generator offshore now, so finish clearing the deck and send the vessel back out. We can get the slops unloaded in a few days' time.
By round-tripping the vessel, any bacteria within the slops has more time to generate H2S. Once detected, a state of emergency exists both on the vessel and the immediate vicinity. The persons involved have to make the area as safe as possible and as soon as possible, taking into consideration wind direction, vessel fans, and so on. This situation will severely impact the safety of people. A secondary consideration is the time it takes to recover from this situation. Under exceptional circumstances, an incident like this could shut down the whole harbour. This obviously impacts on non-productive time and company reputation.
I'm John, and I want to tell you about my experience. The day one, we were staying alongside a rig and should received about 180 cubes with slops. Yeah, we got on board this declaration of dangerous goods, as was usual at that time, and the paper seems to be okay. We have received about, during the period on board, about 2,000 cubes of this. So we didn't think it was any dangerous. We start receiving the slop, and we have received about 50 cubes, and the ABs tell me about was smelling very bad on deck. And we stop the rig. We go down to measure if it was some H2S. There was no sign of it. And the rig said they know about what was the problem. They put in some scavenger, and we start receiving again. And yeah, it smells more like a mud cleaner at the moment. And we were staying alongside for 1.5 hours. I received about 180 cubes. And day two, we was back in the same rig and receiving more, about 185 cubes with slop. So we get the total amount on board of 365. On the day three, we came ashore to deliver, but the tanks were filled up, and we could deliver about 120 cubes ashore, and we still remained about 245 cubes on board, and that we have for 4 days before we could go to harbor number 2 and deliver the rest. We was working on deck with painting and everything. It was nice weather, and it was a little bit bad smell on board, but we didn't think about what we have in the tanks. It was about half an hour or something left from the delivery. There was 50 cubes in the tank. I called the receiver and said it smells very bad here. Yeah, he told it smells very bad himself. But they didn't do anything about it. And the ABs called from deck and they said they're itching the eyes. They were feeling a little bad in the stomach, headache. And we done as finished, and we went from the harbor 2 and should go back to the harbor number 1. And we opened all the doors and to fill the air, fresh air in the vessel. Me and the chief officer, we went down on deck and opened the hatch on the tank and measured, and it was over 100 ppm of H2S. Then we called the company ashore to tell them about it. It's only the day 5th, I think, that I come to. Then they coming aboard the company who's receiving it and checked. And they have take samples from the tanks as well. And they measure about over 1,000 ppm with H2S in the tank. Over 1,000 ppm with hydrocarbons, and the PID 660 ppm with toxic gases. These ABs have felt dizziness and a little bit sick. I called the hospital in the nearest town and sent them to the hospital so they get examined, checked. They were staying the night over, but take several tests. After a while they feel the health was not so good. They feel pressure on the heart, the lungs. The day after, when they come on board again, we have to send another AB because he felt very sick during the night with headache, pressure on the chest. And he was also sent to the hospital and was there during the night. But one of the other ABs, he was sent home to another hospital. But luckily, they are painting inside the cargo rail where the vent were. They're using masks, luckily. So maybe that's who saved them. Because when you measure about over 200 ppm of this H2S, you can in worst case die and above. I have learned that shortcuts don't help anybody. We need to follow the guidelines to make sure the paper is right. And they take samples and analyze the stuff they should deliver on board the vessels. And every declaration is okay. So they have to follow the guidelines.
This organizational flowchart provides a visual structure for each stage of the process and who is responsible and accountable. The decision for slops disposal is made offshore by the operator drilling rep who manages the drilling program.
Frank, I'm going to need a vessel in 2 days' time for offloading slops.
Okay. How many barrels do you want to offload?
Well, we've got 500 barrels from mud pit cleaning, plus 100 barrels from the rainwater tank, and we'll need another 1,000 barrels for the wellbore cleanup we're about to start. So make sure there's space for 2,000 barrels, just in case there's a bit extra.
It's important for the offshore logistics coordinators to provide as much notice as possible for the onshore logistics team to allocate a vessel with appropriate tank space, as there are many aspects to vessel operations, including tank cleaning, crew changes, other cargo requirements, notification to waste disposal company, etc. Once the planning has been completed, a vessel is allocated and an estimated arrival date confirmed to the rig. This is then discussed with the vessel master, who checks the plan for vessel stability and other issues. Onshore, the logistics rep contacts the vessel master regarding the cargo manifests and sailing plan. He also cross-checks the slops analysis form.
The vessel's due here in 10 hours. Make sure the slops analysis and treatment's carried out so we can sign off and send the paperwork to the master. Okay then?
Yep, okay. Perfect then, I'll do it right now.
Thanks.
The final sampling and analysis should be completed in a timely fashion ahead of the slops being backloaded to the vessel to ensure the results are representative. Sampling must be carried out in accordance with the carriage of oil-contaminated cargoes for transportation by offshore supply vessels, found within the GOMO industry guidelines. It's mandatory to treat all slops with biocide and to raise the pH to between 9.5 and 10.5 to avoid the generation of H2S. The top of the sample sheet contains general information, including the waste consignment note number. In the next section, an estimate of the main slop's components needs to be listed and must correspond with the description given in the waste consignment note. In the following section, the chemical analysis section confirms the physical and basic chemical properties of the slops and identifies any potential hazards such as flammability and toxicity. Within the form, there is acceptance criteria that must be met. If any results fail to meet the acceptance criteria, the slops cannot be backloaded to the vessel bulk tanks, and further treatment or alternative means of backloading, such as using tote tanks, needs to be arranged. The conclusion section should be used to note any unusual components or general comments. The next section ensures that the slops analysis is conducted in compliance with industry guidelines. In rare cases, there is a requirement to load sequential batches of slops into a common tank or a tank that has not been cleaned. On these occasions, the second statement must be followed. The following section on H2S avoidance is a prompt to ensure all mandatory treatments and necessary arrangements have been made. It's important that the analysis form is checked for completion and signed off by the person who conducted the slops analysis and operator representative. Remember, the duty of care for managing the slops remains with the operating company at all times. Once the analysis backload form has been reviewed, signed off and dated, the sheet is forwarded to the vessel master, along with the waste consignment documentation.
Jim, can you come over here and we'll go through one of these forms?
Sure, Captain.
Now, we were talking before about the importance of these forms, so let's go through this one, which has been sent from the east platform before we get there. Okay. Right, so you'll see...
The master is explaining to the cadet the importance of reviewing the analysis results, and also the time and date the analysis was carried out. It's vitally important that the form is correctly completed, and the vessel must ensure that the key information is present and that it makes sense. Was H2S detected in the fluid? Was the LEL and flashpoint within allowable limits? Have the slops been treated with biocide and the pH raised? Has the form been signed by the analyst and operator representative? The master is responsible for the safety of the people on his vessel. The master or competent delegate must review this analysis form before accepting waste to ensure the fluid does not form a risk to personnel.
Okay, Jim, well, everything seems to be in order. Now, where are we going to put these 2,000 barrels of slops?
Tanks 1 and 2?
Well, tank 2 has mud residue in it, so we can't backload it to there. We've got to think of the ballasting. So we'll put half port and half starboard. Okay, I think tanks 1s and 4s are clean. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll sign that off and then we'll get the backloading underway. Okay, well, come here and I'll show you how we fill this in then. So you put your tank numbers down there.
Once happy with the form, the vessel contacts the rig to confirm they're ready to receive the slops. Onshore logistics must manage all cargo requirements as efficiently as possible. He or she must contact the waste handling company to confirm the quantity of waste, confirm availability of space, and subsequent vessel tank cleaning. It goes without saying that the waste handling company requires as much notice as possible. It's imperative that a check is made on the tank gases to ensure they are non-hazardous, to protect the people who will be handling the slops. The slops have now been deemed safe and are transferred to shore for disposal. Once all the waste has been offloaded, the tanks are cleaned. This operation is risk assessed, and part of the assessment is the makeup of the slops residue. There are always time pressures at this stage, but by round-tripping slops we can significantly increase the risk of H2S generation. If round-tripping cannot be avoided, then a risk assessment must be carried out. This risk assessment must include a competent operator representative. A review of the rig's backload form and further analysis is carried out to ensure that the slop's volume and pH have not changed. Any change must be understood, as it could be an indication of bacterial activity or a change in the composition of the slops. The increased risk of H2S generation must be managed. The outcome could be that the slops cannot be round-tripped. If there is any doubt, the slops must be offloaded before the vessel sails. The aim of this program is to raise awareness of good practice and share learning, thereby preventing future incidents.
A couple of months after, 3-4 months after, we was staying with another rig, and he asked me if I could take on board some slops. Yeah, I could do that, I said, but first I need to have the papers and the analyze form. But they didn't know about this analyze form. So I have to mail on board the rig the NVIA guidelines with this analyze and how to handle slops. And they print out and write down something and send it on board. I said, it's not good. You have to take analyze and make sure it's not contains any H2S or other toxic gases. And he said, okay. And they get the papers set to the rig again. And I said, I can take it on board, but only if you have make it ready on shore. They can receive it. It was only 4 hours into the shore from that rig. But we disconnected the hose and we were waiting because we was a storage vessel at that time. And we were staying outside the 500-meter zone, and they're coming another vessel. And the rig asked him to take, can you take this slop we had on board? Yeah, it's no problem. And they connected the hose, and I listened to the UHF and the VHF. And he only asked on the bridge to the deckhands, is the paper come on board? Yes, they said. And yes, start deliver. And they're receiving. And he went from there. He didn't ask about anything else. So I felt at that time I was the bad man who didn't cooperate or anything. And it's sometimes like this still. We have to take this more serious, and the same has the rig. They have to take this more serious, because we have learned that several rigs, they don't know the seriousness of this thing yet. We still explain the rigs what they should do in some places. And now these days we measure the tanks before we deliver it ashore and everything. And we also need this analyze form from the NVIA guidelines, and it should be filled out in the right way. If it's not filled out, we return it on board to the rig and denied to receive anything. The procedure now, they have to call it in and say they have about 120 cubes, for example, and they have to make sure there is space on the tanks ashore to the waste receiver. And then they have to take samples from the slop and analyze it, with measuring if it's toxic gases or something. And then they have to write it down in an analyzed form. And when we get the paper on board, we check the paper if it's okay and everything is filled out and it's signed by the producer. When we have checked the paper, we take down the hose and receive it, if everything is okay. If it's not okay, we deny to take anything on board.
Further guidance can be found in the GOMO guidelines for the carriage of oil-contaminated cargoes for transportation by offshore supply vessels. Thanks for listening.